First, I'd like to flow appreciation for your teachings. My life has changed dramatically in the last 4 years. Since I've been listening, I look forward to my weekly CD. I can hardly wait for the mail person to drop it off. One of the ways my life has changed is that I've obtained a sense of peace about what's going on in the world. And so the larger the circle, the easier it is to be peaceful. And as that circle comes in, I'm more and more able to be peaceful with what people are doing, what's going on in the world, things that really don't affect me, understanding that that is their vibration and that those things are a perfect match for them. As that circle gets narrower, for example, at work, it's more challenging. I've been in city government for many years. We're the people who make the laws and enforce the rules. And as a city administrator, I have an unusual situation and circumstance where my job is about enforcing those rules, many of which I now find laughable because I understand that they're made in an attempt to control behaviors and people, and they're things that I don't care about any longer. And yet it's difficult to leave a profession, and I see where and I can make and do make a difference. But sometimes when I want to ignore those laws and rules and just let people do whatever they're going to do, people come to me and say, you must enforce the rules.
For example?
For example, just an employee who decides that they're going to do their job their way or come in when they want to or leave when they want to or take long lunches. I really don't care about that so much anymore, but other people do. So since I'm the administrator, they come to me and ask me to enforce the rules. My question is how I can find a balance of what feels good when I'm less and less caring about the rules to enforce and more caring about what makes me feel good and allowing people to feel good. And yet I get caught in the middle of two vibrations which say it feels good to do my job well, and it also feels good to let people be doing what they want to do and who they are.
Well, as you think about the two concurrent journeys that we were talking about, in other words, you could approach your job. In other words, this is what is expected of me here. These are the agreements that I've come into. It's like if you were watching a football game and they have some very specific guidelines. In other words, there are times that they can do certain things and there are restraints. There are lines they cannot cross and all kinds of rules for which they may be given a penalty if they break the rule. And as you watch that game, while none of it's very serious, in other words, in the greater scheme of things, you would let most people do anything that they are wanting to do. You would not guide them according to how many lines they could cross. And yet, within the framework of that game, it is somehow satisfying to have some parameters set, something to measure against. It's a game that you're playing in, and everyone agrees that they could play in a lot of other games, but if they're going to play in this game, they're going to play by those rules. And the experience, you've got to admit, is much more satisfying because of the framework than it would be without the framework. Yes?
Yes.
So we look at your laws and rules as you co-create with one another, as you socialize or live in societies together, as frameworks or agreements in which you can create. Jerry and Esther have been watching. They saw it without meaning to the first time, although nothing is ever accidental. They saw a new television program called Super Nanny, where a British woman who has been a nanny for many years goes into homes with completely unruly children and in a very short period of time transforms them into children that are actually nice to be with, where in the beginning they are not nice to be with. And as Jerry and Esther are watching, they've got to admit that they wouldn't want to be in the house with those children and the way they're behaving. Many of them spitting, throwing things, actually trying to hurt others around them. And in a short period of time, seeming to come back into alignment. And one of the things that Super Nanny instructs or encourages parents to understand is that when the children have some idea of the structure or what is expected of them, then they can calculate more readily how to move around in it. And as Jerry and Esther watched it and saw the seeming positive effect from it, they asked us what it is that we see Super Nanny doing that is making such a difference. And we said there are certainly behavior modifications that are taking place, but the thing that she is doing that is most significant is that she is identifying what she wants and she is not deviating from it. And she is bringing the parents into alignment. She is helping them to identify what it is they want and what it is that they expect. And this is truly the power of influence. When you are clear about what you want and you aren't contradicting your own energy with doubting or wondering or worrying or noticing something that is the opposite of what you want. When you are single-minded, so to speak, you have great power of influence. And when you do that, you don't need a lot of rules and requirements and laws. In other words, anyone who wants to play in the game that you're playing in comes into alignment with you. But what happens in your world today, there are a lot of people that are being forced to play in a game they don't want to play in. Even these children in many of these homes are not wanting to live by the rules that someone else is establishing. And all Super Nanny is doing is taking the power back. She's finally just convincing the children through a sequence of events of taking their toys from them or taking them to the naughty spot or the naughty stool or the naughty mat or the naughty room, that they're always going to go there, and all she's doing is teaching them that they like that less than they do that, and they like that less than they do that. And that is the way that much of the world is established. In other words, you have these punishing mechanisms that you offer. We have to say, however, that as we look into your population, we see that there are far more people breaking the rules than there are those keeping the rules. Unfortunately, most of you don't even have any idea about most of the rules. In other words, you all, even when you're wanting to be law-abiding citizens, are breaking more laws and more rules than you are keeping every single day, often in ignorance of the existence of the law altogether. You have so many laws that your enforcers can't even begin to enforce them. They only enforce the ones that are economically viable to them. So what happens is you become a society that is more aware of what you don't want than you are about what you do want. And your laws are really pointed toward that too. If you do this, then we will do this thing to you that you don't want. And if you do this, then this negative consequence will happen. And we think that's the contradiction that you're having with yourself, is that you can feel that this quantifiable journey that you're on and what your inner being is guiding you toward is alignment with what feels good. Your inner being is not keeping you out of danger and trying to help you prevent getting into trouble. Your inner being is not guiding you away from sickness or away from harm. Your inner being is guiding you to the abundance of all of the well-being that you seek. And so you can feel a very cross current going on where your work or the action part of your work environment is about what you don't want people to do or what they shouldn't do, where every part of that which comes forth from within you is wanting to inspire them to their greatest value. If we were a parent, or if we were interacting with children, or if we were like you interacting with anyone, but we're going to point it toward children first, it's easier for you to hear it, we would first remember that they have source energy that is always extending itself to them, and that kindness and well-being and clarity and flexibility and stamina and energy, all of these wonderful physical sensations that are as a result of this connection to energy are all being offered. And we would see our role as doing the best that we could do to see them in ways and reflect back to them things that causes them as often as possible to connect with that stream, with that current. And so if we were a parent, we would not be watching for errors that we would be trying to correct. We would be looking for what they are doing that is making them feel good. We would be looking for their positive aspects, and we would be beating the drum of those. And We know it's hard for parents to hear, and Super Nanny certainly would not want to hear it. But we would turn the other cheek when they are doing something that is inappropriate, because by accentuating it and putting your attention upon it, you just become more of a vibrational match to it. Now, we know you know all of that. In other words, that you're sitting here with this wonderful question before us because you do understand all of that, and you're wanting to figure out how you can live in the real world in an environment. In other words, you know you can't rewrite all the rules. You can't show up at your city government and announce to everyone, we're wiping all of the rules off the book and we're just going to trust people to be nice and play the way they should, because your society is not ready to hear this. Even though it is the basis of everything, most people have been adjusting and responding to conditions for quite a long while. But we do want to say to you that if you will put your emphasis upon issue by issue, getting clear about what you want, and cleaning up your vibration around it, you will find the power of your point of influence. You will discover that by you being clear, that others will follow. Now, the first step for you has to be, you have to make a decision. It's just like the woman with arthritis in her hips. You can be a part of city government and you can be fretful and worried about the bureaucracy and the red tape and the ineffectiveness of it. Or you can be in city government and feel appreciation for the organized structure and the value that it brings to your citizenship. In other words, there are many positive aspects that government offers. And as you focus upon them and use the things about your work that make you feel good when you focus upon them as your excuse to align with source energy, you will become a city official who is tuned in, tapped in, turned on. You will become one who leads through the clarity of your example, not by guiding people away from what you don't want, but by influencing them toward what you do want. Don't try to sort it all out. You cannot ever do that, but you can pay attention to the way you feel, subject by subject. So let's say, is really one of the most often or significant things that you've been grappling with something that an employee is doing? Is that what hinders you or aggravates your life the most?
It's more employee issues than it is people out in the citizenry, because I can release that and know that whatever's going to happen for them happens for them if they put their trash out at the wrong time or whatever.
So give us an example of somebody comes to you with some complaint, for example.
For example, a high-level employee who is not coming to work on time, staying gone way too long, not getting projects accomplished. Other people are pointing out time after time the unfairness of the treatment when people are allowed to do things that they're not allowed to do. I understand where they're coming from. I would like for it to sort itself out.
But see,
coming to me.
Here's the thing that we want to say to you, because as you ask this question, you think that what you're reaching for is some word from Abraham or some methodology, some action that you can apply to soothe them. In other words, the one who's complaining is bothering you more than the one who is being complained about, because you don't want them to feel injustice, and you don't want them to work hard to keep the rules and then to feel bad that somebody else is not working hard to keep the rules. But what we want to say to you is, we don't want to talk to you about them and how they feel. We want to talk to you about you and how you feel. In other words, we want you to reach the place where when someone feels injustice, that you are not set off balance by their attention to injustice. Because you see how it works. They want you to make those people behave in the way that they think they should behave so that they can be happy. And in essence, you're doing the same thing. You want us to give you some tool so that those unhappy people will stop bothering you with their unhappiness so that you can be happy. And we want to say to you, you've got to decide that you're going to find a way of looking at it in a way that can allow the energy to continue to flow through you. Because if you think your happiness is dependent upon getting those people whipped into shape so that those people aren't bothered, so that you're not bothered, you're never going to be able to clean that up.